The first, I think, the two basic divides that we find in the electorate, if you go through the surveys and you do look at some of the more recent research done on Malaysian polity, is that the big divide is actually between the rural voters and the urban voters. That is very clear, come across in all the research I've seen. The second big divide is, of course, between Peninsular voters and East Malaysian voters. The way of how they decide who to vote for is very different. Okay. The second point is that if you read the blogs, especially all the political blogs, there's a huge amount of material about the possibility of a hung parliament. I'm here to tell you that this is not possible. It is not possible. Come on 5th of May, on the evening of 5th of May, I can tell you that there is no such thing as hung parliament. I can assure all of you here that we will have a very clear winner on that night. There's no such thing as hung parliament. I don't know how this idea took root in cyberspace, but there's a huge amount of material there talking about hung parliament, and it is simply not possible. Not possible. Okay. The other point is that this election will answer two key questions that's been keeping political scientists in Malaysia busy for the last 20, 30 years. And these two key questions are, number one, is it possible for PAS to break out from north of Selangor? As you know, right, if you look at past performance, right, the majority of the victory has been in Kelantan, Terengganu, Kedah, but all of it sort of north of Selangor. They've never been able to break out that mall. So this time we will see whether it is possible for them to break out that mall. The second related question, of course, is that whether DAP can break out of the urban areas. They're trying very hard this too, so this election will really tell us, because they're really putting a concerted fight, whether it is possible for them to break out of their traditional zones of influence. Okay. The second thing is East Malaysia. There's been a lot of interest about East Malaysia. Part of it is because 2008, when East Malaysia was cited as a Barisan National Fixed Deposit. And I think it's kind of misleading, because I think that if you look at East Malaysia, right, the way it's being reported is completely misleading, because the fact of the situation is that East Malaysia, right, access to financial resources is still king. Just as an example, if you want to campaign in a rural state like Hulu Rejang in Sarawak, there is no way you can campaign effectively if you don't have a helicopter. I mean, that's just a fact. And to get a helicopter, basically you need resources. It's similar to all the rural areas. The resource access to resource is still king in East Malaysia. So that much has not changed. Okay. Right. The other significant thing about this coming general election is that a lot of emphasis has been placed on young voters. What is interesting is that although so much resources is spent on young voters, if you look carefully at some of the surveys done, it shows that young voters are actually not that interested in politics. They want to get themselves involved in activities, but they're actually not that interested in politics. So what I'm suggesting here is that a lot of the resources concentrating on young voters are actually misplaced. What you have is that a group of young voters who are very interested in politics, but the bulk of them are not interested in politics. So reaching out to this group will be quite difficult. And I suspect a lot of the money spent on trying to reach out to this group will be misdirected. For example, just as a simple example, I look at some of the younger members of my own family. I always ask them, I say, do you read the news? They say, yes. What sort of news do they read? They read the entertainment pages. And you see them on the phone all the time reading stuff, and you think that, wow, these people are really interested in the GE. Actually, they're not. They're just updating their status on Facebook, what they're doing. So things like that. So yes, it is true that what I said earlier, that in the urban area, people are using cyberspace to campaign. But what I'm suggesting to you all over here is that when it comes to the young voters, you really need a new approach to reach them. The traditional approach of organizing activities, trying to get them to attend ceramah, all those sort of things. You may bring them up, but I can tell you their heart is not really in it. They're more interested in other things. The other thing about this election is that there's also a lot of cyberspace articles about the potential for violence if the result is sort of close or what they call a repeat of the May 13th incident. Again, I think that's very, very misleading and it's very dangerous. I'm here to tell you that based on my own personal work and knowledge, May 13th will not repeat in 2014. It is simply not possible. Part of it has got to do with Malaysian political culture. We don't have a history of political violence in this country. Secondly, most people will not go for it. You might have isolated incidents, but the idea of having a nationwide crisis similar to May 13 is simply unthinkable, and I don't think it will happen. One other interesting thing that is not widely reported in this election, of course, is the amount spent. I suspect, rather than the mother of all elections in the 13th general election, this will be the mother of all money spent in general elections. I'm not telling you guys a secret, but you know, right, on average, the calculation is that for a certain site, they calculate on average you need 3 million per constituency. So that will give you an idea of 660 million, that's the minimum. But that does not include the cost by the central office and all that sort of thing. But the reason why I said this will be the mother of all money spent in general elections is this is the first general election since independence where the opposition have access to significant funding. So combine that with the funding on the incumbent side, you can sort of think about how much money is involved. So I'm not going to give you any figures now because I think it's unfair, but I'm sure all of you here are experts and you can guess what the amount of money we spend. Now, in terms of the manifesto, it's interesting because the manifesto on both sides, as I mentioned earlier, talk about reforms. And on both sides, right, they all go for, rather than policy, they go for wish list. They say, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. Not a lot of space is given to real policy issues. In other words, I suspect they think that the people are not interested in policies. So, for example, just as a very simple example, on the Pakatan side, right, if you look at the manifesto, if you go down to the ground, you ask the people, have you read the manifesto? Most of them will say no. If you notice, what do you know about the manifesto? The two most popular items that people hear about and they like it is reduction of car prices. You know, right, Pakatan promised to get rid of excise duty and you get a 20% instant discount on new cars. The second thing that they really like is free education. So this is very much what I call a populist type of thing, that you keep promising all this sort of thing, when in fact manifesto should be about policy issues. So, right. Now, related to this is the issue of cash handouts. I know a lot of people are very cynical about the money given out under BRIMS and all this aid to families earning less than 3,000 ringgit a month, or household income of less than 3,000 ringgit a month. But I can tell you, BRIM 1 and BRIM 2 was extremely effective, very, very effective among the members of the poor households, especially among the Indian community. So although all of us sitting in this room may laugh about it because we're part of the middle class, you know, I can tell you among the lower class, BRIM actually is very, very effective. So the person who thought of BRIM should make sure he gets a reward from the government. Okay. Finally, the final point I want to make is that change. Is change really possible? If you look at the cold hard facts, I think you have to come back to the original premise of the electoral system in Malaysia. No matter what sort of maths you're using, right, the reality is that 150 seats in this country out of 222 are Malay-stroke Bumiputera majority seats. So the only possible outcome, no matter how you play the game, is either an all-Malay government or a Malay plus government. That is the core reality of the electoral system in Malaysia. And again, I think this is sometimes missing from the discussion if you read the way the election is reported.